What's up, everybody? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and on this channel, we break down the trials and cases you care most about so you can understand how the American civil and criminal justice system works. And we try to make sure you understand what your rights are in every situation, which is why we try to walk you through the entire legal process while also answering your insightful questions along the way. And while it's not legal advice, it's always exciting. So buckle up for another episode of The Lawyer You Know. What's up, everybody? Just past halfway through the week, and yet another piece of information drops in this Idaho 4 case. And this one is really sad, and it's kind of it's an interesting conversation that I think needs to be had because people are up in arms about a legal discussion that I feel like most people are misunderstanding. I understand people's frustrations. I understand how if you look at it, you should be able to use your common sense and say, no, this shouldn't be that way. But I think we need to look a little closer and try to understand a little bit more why the law is set up the way that it is. And especially when we're talking about public defenders and public defender offices and clients of the public defender. Okay. Because it is different than when you go hire your own private attorney. So today we're going to listen to an interview with Xana Kernodle's mother, who was the former client of Ann Taylor, who now represents Brian Kohberger, who's accused of ending the life of Xana Kernodle. So obviously her mother is not okay with this, but we're going to learn a lot in this interview about what she knows, what she doesn't know, how she finds things out to understand, what this relationship may have actually been like when we talk attorney-client privilege and whether or not a conflict should exist and things like that. But I do want to say, before we even get into the interview, I don't want to rip on the way people look. I don't want to make fun of the way people look. I don't want to make light of difficult situations or heavy situations. But we cannot gloss over or pretend like we don't notice that just visually, it looks like there are things going on. And we know she has a history of drug abuse, and it seems like she is still on her road to recovery, hopefully. So we will point that out, that is obvious, and that is something to take into account. And we do, when I say scrutinize statements, I mean, we test their credibility. We see if there are any other angles people may be aiming at when they make statements, whether they're testifying, whether they're giving public interviews, whatever it may be. So we are going to talk through that a little bit together. And it is different, right? When you see Kaylee Gonsalvez's parents explain something and you see Xana Kernodle's mother explain something, there are obvious differences. We know that she has had criminal charges recently that Ann Taylor represented her on. So I think that context is okay. I just don't really want to talk about in the comments or on the video. We're not really going to discuss the way that she looks or anything really about her looks. But this interview is interesting. There are a lot of legal facts that they talk about and a lot of lawful laws or statements of law that they talk about, especially the host. We're going to get to some right off the jump. And I think it's important because I don't know, would you consider News Nation mainstream media? I don't even know. I don't know who they're affiliated with or whatever. But a lot of media pundits are discussing things like this. And I think that they are not necessarily explaining it to you, the people, appropriately, which is why we do videos like this, to hope you can understand this a little bit more, because you're totally, it's understandable that you would be upset by this or think that this was unfair. So don't think that I don't understand that. But let's listen to how this interview goes and discuss conflict of interest from Ann Taylor, and should she not be able to represent Brian Kohberger. And just because I'm going to have the answer I have, let me make this clear as well. If she ends up getting off the case, or a judge throws her off the case, or she does withdraw, I think it would be because of media attention at this point. And we have seen the media affect huge decisions. But legally speaking, at this point, before we listen to this interview, I don't see a conflict of interest or a reason that she should not be able to represent Brian Kohberger. Let's listen in.
There have been conflicts of interest with attorneys for far less than this. I mean, let me give you an example. If you think that perhaps some point you want to divorce your spouse and you have a conversation with a couple of lawyers, your spouse can no longer retain any of those lawyers just because you had a conversation.
So let's talk about that, because she's right. that does create a conflict of interest. If you're thinking about having a divorce and you consult about that divorce with divorce lawyers, then your spouse cannot go hire the divorce lawyers you've already consulted with about your potential divorce. But what she's wrong about is that that's far less than what we're dealing with in this situation. Now, I assume she thinks and she means that divorce is far less heinous or shocking or horrible when compared to a quadruple murder. But when you talk about the attorney-client relationship, if a potential client comes and discusses the exact case with you, their feelings and facts and statements and what they believe and what their goals are in a case, obviously you can't represent the other side that they're going to be fighting against while you know everything that they're going to say and do and what they want. That's like a prototypical conflict of interest. Legally speaking, that is not far less than the attorney-client relationships and how they are affected here, where Xana Kernodle's mother is not a direct victim of this case, and the crimes that Xana Kernodle conflicted with or hired Ann Taylor for have nothing to do with this Brian Kohberger representation as far as we know right now. And there's more that comes in the interview I'll save it for, but that's not far less legally speaking. Yet that's how it was pitched, and she's correct. That would be a conflict of interest. But it's not far less, and I think we need to understand that and understand why.
So this woman, Cara Northington, whose daughter was violently murdered in Idaho, one of the Idaho Four, those 4 students killed in Moscow at the University of Idaho. She is now facing the reality that the person she trusted most with 4 of her cases is now representing her daughter's accused killer.
Okay, another issue I have, and this is where the public defender part starts to come in. The person she trusted the most. Is that a true statement? Do we think that Xana Kernodle's mother trusted Ann Taylor the most? I take issue with that. And I'm not saying that she doesn't trust her, and I'm not saying that she didn't do a good job or that she doesn't think she'll do a good job in the future. I'm not even saying that she wouldn't pick Ann Taylor if she had a choice. But the truth is, she doesn't. Whoever would have been appointed to her case out of the PD's office, she would have had to go with. You do not have the right to choose the actual public defender to represent you if you're indigent and you qualify for the public defender. That's not how it works. Now, many times, if you have the same one over and over, they will try to appoint the same lawyer to continue that relationship because you know each other, whatever it may be. But it is not like a private lawyer, somebody who's come and chosen me 5 times in a row and they're going to choose me every time they can in the future. It is not the same thing. I still don't think I would have a conflict of interest, but even less so in this situation. And the hyperbole is frustrating because I don't think that she trusted Ann Taylor most. You guys let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree.
Here's that conversation.
So, Cara, what was your first reaction when you learned that your former attorney is representing the man accused of killing your daughter?
I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken because I trusted her. She pretended that she was wanting to help me. And
okay, a little bit more hyperbole. So I trusted her. Fine, trusted her. That's totally reasonable. Not trusted her most for all 4 of her cases. That's just hyperbole, in my opinion, trying to make a point here. And then number 2, she made me think that she was there to help me. Does anybody in the comments think that because Ann Taylor is representing Brian Cook, she's a public defender? Like, she represents all kinds of people charged with all kinds of things. She's death penalty certified, which means she represents the worst of the worst crimes charged. So just because she's representing Brian Kohberger doing her job, now she was tricking Xana Kernodle's mother? I just don't think that's fair. And I have to come to her defense a little bit. I just don't think that's fair that she was tricking her into believing that she cared about her, wanted to help her. I believe with everything I have, she wanted to help her and still wants to help her.
And to find that out that she's representing him, I can't even convey how betrayed I feel.
Have you had a chance?
I think that's fine. she can't convey how betrayed she feels. Somebody that has represented her now has represented somebody accused of killing her daughter. That's fair. Totally fair. I feel betrayed. I feel like trust was broken. Fine. That's all totally fine.
Chance to speak with her about this?
Have you had a chance to speak with her about this? Okay, that's important as well. Have you had a chance to speak with her about this?
No, I haven't spoken with her. I found out through a friend who found it on Reddit.
No, I haven't had a chance to speak with her about it. I found out through a friend on Reddit. Okay. And again, just a little bit of a difference here. I don't know how the process is, and every public defender handles their cases differently, but there's no way I would ever withdraw without letting my client know, or substitute counsel without my client knowing. But the public defender is different. They have conflict counsel in place for situations like this. They do not have to get the client's consent. This is all an interesting part of the process. Is it fair? Does it make everybody feel good? I mean, is it fair? I do think there are fair elements to this because of the lack of death penalty certified attorneys, and because the public defender's office is underfunded and overworked. They have an impossible job to do, that they do the absolute best that they can. They're never going to make every client happy. Half the clients come in there who have to have the public defender and are like, oh, you're a horrible lawyer. It's like, dude, what did I do to you? They get disrespected. And I just don't think interviews like this are fair.
You found out through a friend through social media. You weren't notified by Ann Taylor, your attorney, herself?
Right now.
And have you tried to reach out to her?
No, I just found out today, literally.
Have you tried to reach out to her? No. So again, this is all Ann Taylor's fault. Ann Taylor's so horrible. She didn't let her know. She doesn't let her know what's going on. Her trust is broken. She's betrayed, but she's never tried to reach out to her either. And this is what I'm trying to tell you. A lot of times these cases can get resolved with one or two conversations, or barely even getting to know your lawyer. It's not like you give them all of the intricate details every time you get arrested for drug possession. That's not how it works. We don't even know if Ann Taylor has any confidential information. We definitely would not think, I would think, that she doesn't have any information that's going to be used in her Kohberger defense. And also right now, hold on. I keep wanting to jump the gun on one statement she makes later.
So, yeah.
So, I mean, just so many thoughts. It's so incredible that there is this connection. Are you going to try to fight this at all?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Are you going to try to fight this at all? Yeah, absolutely. How are you going to fight this? I guess the only thing she could do is say, I gave her all this confidential information that now she can use to help Brian Kohberger. She can use it against my daughter and her friends or whatever. She can use it while cross-examining witnesses. I gave her all this information about Brian Kohberger, and it's now going to be totally unfair that she has all this information that she's going to use in this case. That's the only way she could really fight it. She can't fight it by saying she was my attorney first. She can't fight it by saying she did too good of a job for me. That's the attorney that I have to have representing me, or I'm not going to accept another attorney. Because again, that's not how it works in the public defender situation. So when she says she's going to fight it, I guess this is what fighting it looks like. And please follow with me here, right? I'm nothing against her. And I don't know Ann Taylor personally. I don't know if she's a good lawyer, a bad lawyer. I don't know if she's a good person, a bad person. It has nothing to do with this. It has to do with our system. And we have to have a system in place where people get representation. Even people like Brian Kohberger. Even people like Xana Kernodle's mother.
Yes.
Because as I understand it, this would require a waiver, something that you sign and that he would sign in order for her to go ahead and be able to do this legitimately. I can imagine the way your reaction is that you are not interested in signing a waiver to allow her to continue on.
Right, exactly. And I'd already given her power of attorney. I'd already signed over power of attorney so that she could help me with getting into rehab and whatnot.
Couple things. Number one, you would have to sign a waiver. And we discussed waiver on our last video. She would not have to sign a waiver of conflict if the lawyer has conflicted off the case. If there was found to be a conflict, the only person that would have to sign a conflict of interest waiver right now would be Brian Kohberger, who Ann Taylor still represents. And that's only if there was actually a conflict. Sometimes public defenders have conflict counsel come in just because there's the threat or the potential of a conflict. Sometimes they have them come in, not even because there's a conflict, but because they cannot handle the case, because the death penalty case, like Brian Kohberger's, is equal to a heavier caseload. Like, I can't remember what they said. It's like half a caseload just from this one case. That's how much work it is. So she probably had to conflict off a bunch of cases or get conflict counsel or other attorneys to handle lots of her cases. That's what happens not just in the public defender's office, but in big firms. You hire the firm. You don't just hire Mr. Smith. So if Miss Jones shows up to represent you, you hired Smith and Jones, not just Mr. Smith. So that question was just incorrect. There does not legally have to be a conflict waiver signed by Xana Kernodle's mother at this point. It's January 26th. The judge has already ordered this January 5th. It's done. If it was legally required, it would have already been done. And I say that because the rules could be different in Idaho. I don't think they are. And it definitely doesn't seem like it based on what the judge is doing. Then number two, she already gave her power of attorney. I've seen headlines. I've seen a lot of people making a big deal about she's already given her power of attorney. Again, my guess would be that's something that could be transferred within lawyers at the public defender's office or conflict counsel. She can sign that over to conflict counsel. It doesn't mean Ann Taylor is going to keep making decisions for her. And she even said that power of attorney was to help her get into a rehab facility. So what does that have to do with Brian Kohberger's case? How does that create a conflict? I realize for headlines and it sounds good and it sounds like shady stuff is happening in the background. But to me, as a lawyer, it just sounds like Ann Taylor's trying to help Xana Kernodle's mother when she represented her, get her into rehab. But now this came up. She has to take this case. So she's going to give this case to somebody else and focus on Brian Kohberger's case. That's what it looks like to me, a lawyer who's handled multiple cases and dealt with clients that have certain connections. I've had clients that have had connections or been opposing to other clients that I have in totally different situations, or not like each other or hate each other, or ex-husband and wife I've represented in different car accident cases that has nothing to do with their divorce case when they were opposing parties, right? I can represent two exes in two separate car accidents or even in the same car accident. It's a totally separate case.
And so, I mean, I don't understand how she could do this. I don't understand.
And that's fair. She doesn't understand it. And Ann Taylor or somebody from her office should absolutely call and explain this to her and explain to her what's going on. She has that right. She has every right to that. I mean, we saw Sarah Boone and we were reading her letters about how lawyers are not communicating with her. This is not uncommon and it's not correct. It's not fair. It's not how it should be. Ann Taylor should have absolutely called her before doing this substitution, or had the conflict counsel call her and explain what's going on. This should not have been a surprise. This is not something she should have found out on Reddit. Her lawyers should have absolutely told her. But the fact that they didn't tell her does not make it unlawful or create a conflict.
What happens now? Does she still have power of attorney, or what goes on now?
Totally fair.
And no one has
Somebody should have called her and explained all of that to her. Absolutely, she's correct.
reached out to you from the public defender's office to help you navigate next steps.
No.
Have you been in communication with the police and prosecutors about the next step in this process and where you might fit in?
Why would she talk to police and prosecutors? First off, police and prosecutors probably can't talk to her right now because she's represented by counsel, and she probably filed something similar to what they filed in Kohberger's case, where she is invoking her Fifth Amendment right. But I get where the interviewer is going, that nobody's helping her throughout this process, and it's totally unfair. I will say this as well. Let Xana Kernodle's mother be a face to thousands of people that get lost in the process and are not kept up to date by whether it's public defender, court-appointed lawyer, private lawyers. Happens all the time. And that's the problem. And that's why we have to protect this justice system for people that actually care about these clients, want to fight for these clients, want to help these clients, even when a lot of people in the public eye want to throw people like her or Brian Kohberger or Alec Murdoch to the wolves immediately when they're arrested or accused or whatever it may be. And that is an important part of this interview, I think, as well, and an important part of what we've been discussing in the Sarah Boone case. Regardless of what you feel about what these people did or are accused of, they still deserve representation. They still deserve help. And that's what we would want for our cases or our family members or friends' cases as well.
No.
And do you want that? Do you want to be in communication with them to understand what's happening and what they're going to be doing as they move forward in prosecuting him?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So she meant, were they keeping her up to date on what's going on with Brian Kohberger? I did not realize that. Okay. And this is another thing. Gonsalves's parents, all right? A little compare and contrast. They were all over prosecutors, reaching out to everybody, trying to get information, law enforcement. They couldn't get it. So they hired an investigator, they hired a lawyer, and they still are not getting as much information as they want to. So I don't think it's wild to think that Xana Kernodle's mother, who's not reaching out to anybody, is not being kept up to date. There's nothing shady about that. I think they're probably treating all of the victims' families similarly, that if they reach out, they give them certain information, but they are not seeking them out to bring them along every step of the way. Because if they do an interview like this, or like Gonsalves's parents is doing an interview and giving up something that they don't want them to, that could create an issue. And now there's a gag order, even on, I mean, frankly, there's a gag order on the victims' families. She probably doesn't know that. So, you have to, I don't think she would be punished for violating that gag order or anything like that. And she said nobody's been in contact, so she doesn't have any information that would violate the gag order. But if she did answer that question and answered what they're telling her, that could potentially violate the gag order. There's all sorts of things at play here, and it just seems like new stuff every day. So we have to stay focused on what's right, what's lawful, and what actually is relevant to this case.
So no one has reached out to you?
No. Not the prosecutors anyway, no.
Who have you spoken with?
I've honestly, just media has been getting a hold of me.
Do you feel like you're being left out of this process?
A little bit, yeah.
Had you ever?
So, and I've heard some things about what's going on with her and whatever. There might be reasons she's being left out of the process, but who have you spoken with? Only media. That's not a good, that doesn't make me feel like, I don't know how to say this, but it doesn't make me feel like she has gone down the right avenues to try to get information about her daughter's case if all she's talking to is the media. I'll just put it there. But maybe she doesn't know how to. A lot of people don't know how to navigate these waters. I totally get that.
Heard the name Brian Kohberger before?
No, I have not.
Okay. No. That's a big piece of evidence, potentially, because there are some theories out there that, the drug connection or something was going on with her and Brian Kohberger, or her daughter and Brian Kohberger. She said, I have never heard the name Brian Kohberger before in my life. That's actually a big little droplet that we got out of this interview that I didn't even remember when I listened to it the first time.
And do you know of any connection at all that he might have had with your daughter, Xana?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine that she had any connection with him.
Why? Why? Any connection with Xana? Well, I can't imagine. She didn't say no. She didn't say no like she knew for sure that she didn't have a connection, but I can't imagine why. Because he's accused of this? Do we really think that and I'm not talking anything about her job as a mother, my mother as well, okay, who I think was an amazing mother, had no idea who was coming in and out of my college dorm room or my apartment or my townhouse or my condo when I was up at Florida State. She had no idea the girls or guys that would come out that I'd hang out with, that'd be friends with my roommate, dating me, whatever. There's no way any mother would know for sure whether there was some kind of, now, if they were friends or, in a relationship and Xana talked about him all the time, that's fine. She could just say she never talked about him, so I don't know. But I can't imagine, she obviously thinks he did it and there shouldn't be a connection. But to me, it's this is the type of stuff that doesn't hold a lot of water, and I hope people don't run with, because if you think logically about it and use your common sense, what parent knows every person that comes in and out of a college house?
Quite a bit older than all of them. And all of their friends, really. I mean, they didn't really hang out with a lot of older people. So
because he was older.
I don't know if they knew him, or I mean, they could have, because he did attend school at WSU, which is another thing. My oldest daughter Jasmine attends school at WSU.
So maybe there could be a connection because their older daughter went to WSU where Brian was going. So he was older, but he was still in school there. So maybe they did. And there you go. You get the full answer from her. I don't think so, but maybe. I couldn't imagine, but maybe. And here's actually another connection you might not know about. My older daughter went there. And this is the point. We don't know a lot in this case.
And so the fact that the law enforcement knew who he was from the get-go and didn't warn us to keep Jasmine home from school, that just, I'm just beside myself.
And Jasmine was at
I mean, I'll let that one slide.
WSU for the whole 7-week period.
Yes.
From the murders.
So this was not in the shortened version of the interview that I already watched, these couple parts. Come on, do not blame law enforcement because of this. So that you just wanted them to arrest everybody they may have suspected. Yes, they suspected Kohberger. They did not have enough to arrest him. They weren't going to clear Washington State's campus. I mean, that's tough to blame law enforcement for this. I'll just leave it at that.
To the arrest, she was there the whole time.
Yes, yes.
What's her reaction to this been?
I haven't spoken with her about it yet.
Again, that should tell you a lot. So we're complaining about it, and I can't believe Jasmine had to go to school. It seems so unfair. Oh, well, what did she say about it? I haven't even talked to her about it. I'm beside myself that I wasn't able to pull Jasmine from school, but I haven't spoken to her about it. It's been multiple months, which is fine. If you didn't talk to her about it, that's fine. But I don't want to come on an interview and act like I know what she thinks or what she's saying, or that it's so unfair that she didn't come home. Probably not knowing if she even would have come home. I just don't like slinging stuff at public defenders, at law enforcement, at lawyers, when we're just trying to take that angle is what it feels like. It doesn't feel very fair here throughout this interview to either side. Because right now they're hitting on public defender side and the prosecution, law enforcement investigation side. When in reality, it's just somebody that was not very involved in the entire process at all. And there may be a lot of reasons for that, but I don't think it's to the fault of law enforcement, the prosecutor, or the public defender.
I mean, I can only imagine, she was adamant about going to school. She wasn't going to let this keep her from going to school. But I think it would have been different had she known that Xana's killer was going to school with her.
From what you know, no connection.
Xana's killer was going to school with her, which, we don't know that yet, but she can only imagine what she was feeling, which, is, as we know, not admissible or credible evidence.
That you know of anyway, between Kohberger and Xana. Do you think it's possible that he may have connected with Xana and Maddie through the Mad Greek restaurant where they worked?
Now connecting other reports that have already been denied by the Mad Greek. So now she's asking, she's already said she doesn't know about a connection. Now she's saying, do you think it's possible they connected through the Mad Greek? This is just adding fuel to speculative conspiracy theories that at this point have no evidentiary background at all. But this is just a really good example of how this stuff spins out of control.
It's a possibility. I mean,
I'm
sure they connected with a lot of people that way. And
it's also a possibility they just met on the road. It's a possibility they shared the same Uber. It's a possibility they stood in line next to each other. It's a possibility they were in the same chat group on a YouTube page. There's a lot of possibilities.
That could very well be how they connected with him.
Thank you for watching.
So a bit of a frustrating interview, in case you can't tell, from me. But I hope that you were able to learn something throughout this and that you can watch with a keen eye when these interviews take place, because it can be very frustrating to hear this stuff go on, and you hear it from a victim's mother. That sounds like an incredibly credible source. So everything she says, people are going to hang on every word. But so much of it doesn't actually prove anything. Or when you dig a little bit deeper, it's her imagining or thinking, or she couldn't imagine that they knew each other. So how much of it is actually going to even be not speculation and be actual direct evidence? It's very difficult. It's tough. And there's a lot of sad dynamics to this as well, which I understand. But get your questions in the comments. Let me know what you thought about this. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to our page, because we're going to continue to cover this and a lot of other cases that you all have questions about. A bunch of people sent me this interview at Tragos Law on Instagram and Twitter. Follow me on there if you haven't already. That's all we got this time. Until tomorrow.